you don't want to record it, you may want to drop off now. Happy Friday. Good morning once again. And today's our topic is Redis cache updates. So, and by the way, this is our website link. If you want to know what's upcoming session, you can go there and go to our YouTube channel for any um, videos. So before we go on quick updates which happened in the recent um, couple of months, I just want to spend a few minutes on the Redis cache. First of all, Redis Cache is Microsoft Cache as a Service. Just a quick recap. Um, it is done in collaboration with Redis Labs. It provides you the ability to do this caching using this open Redis standard. Okay. And one thing to keep in mind, this is a platform as a service. So basically, you use it. You don't have to deploy any infrastructure or anything. It's basically comes out of the box and you can run it in Azure.
Naveed, are you sharing any slide?
You're not seeing any?
I'm not, I think.
Okay, so let me just stop presenting and
from the charts, they don't see it too, so maybe.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. Let me just share it again. Here we go. Do you see it now?
Icon, yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. So just a quick recap. We're going to talk about Redis Cache, and this is kind of what Redis Cache is. It's a platform as a service, and there's a typo. So, and just to recap on the uses, I think everybody is familiar why cache is used, and here are some of the scenario where you will be using Redis Cache. And so let's. So first thing that Redis Cache is doing, a big update that's happening, is available the ability to do zonal deployment, which is zone redundancy. So on the, if you see there are two diagrams, one on the left-hand side is without zonal redundancy. So what happens is when you deploy Redis Cache, it deploy two instances or two kind of think of it two nodes, two replica nodes. Your application connects to one of those nodes. There is a load balancer sitting in front, which is basically kind of directing where you go. And there is connection forwarding happening. So at a particular moment, one of the nodes is responding to the request. And that becomes the primary node. In the scenario, and if you see in this diagram, it says Azure Data Center. So what happens is in a region, we have zones and zones have data centers. So this is deployed in a particular data center. If that zone or data center goes down, basically your cache will disappear because all this infrastructure is tied to that data center and that data center is not available or that zone is not available. So you lose the cache. On the other hand, if you see on the right-hand side of the diagram, this is where you have cache deployment across zones. So you have multiple zones. So you have like, in this case, there are 4 nodes which are deployed across 3 zones, AZ1, AZ2, AZ3. Of course, in this scenario, still you have one primary node which is serving the request. There is async cache replication happening between nodes. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to deploy anything to do that. All of that is happening behind the scene as we are providing this as a PaaS service, as a part of the how the Redis cache works. So what happens when one zone goes down? As soon as one zone goes down, let's say that this is the AZ3, one of that, and that was your primary replica. If one of the primary nodes goes down, another node will become the primary node, and that will start serving a request. So that will happen automatically behind the scene with as a part of the Redis cache implementation. And what is the advantage of zonal redundancy? As I said, if one of the zone goes down, you still do not lose your cache application. The cache application is still there, and you don't of course, now the redundancy is lower because when the zone is down, but you don't lose your application. One other thing to keep in mind. So let's say that your application was in um, zone 3, and uh, the data center where the cache was hosting was down, but your data center is not impacted in that particular zone. Now you have a latency issue. Just keep that in mind, because now your traffic is going across the zone. So that is something to remember, that yes, zonal deployment gives you high availability, but you have to keep in mind where your application is deployed. If your application is sensitive to latency and as it talks to the cache, then you have to look at how you want to do this. Do you multiple Azure cache deployment in each zone, and that's how you want to work it? Or are you okay with that particular amount of latency? I hope that point is very clear, because with everything um, that zonal redundancy provides, there is an impact on your application if it is very latency sensitive when it comes to cache. So, any questions on this topic? Okay.
So how would it impact the cost?
Yeah, that's always a good question. Yes, it will impact the cost, because what you have is you are paying for per replica. By default, you have 2 replica. As you add zonal redundancy, you will say, okay, deploy 1 replica in each node. So yes, you will be paying more. So you will be paying more cost for each node replica. So yes, so definitely it will be um, uh, more expensive. Okay, so let's continue to move ahead. Let's go on to the private endpoint. Okay, before we kind of talk about private endpoint, before this uh, public preview of private endpoint support, you will have to, I mean, the way you can deploy Redis caches, you can deploy it if you need the integration, like a VNet integration, you have to deploy it inside a virtual network. So let's say that you have applications that are running inside a VNet. They need to access cache, but your security requirements don't want to access the cache over a public IP. In that case, the option was that you can take your cache and deploy it inside a VNet. Okay, this is like VNet injected model, in that it will live in the VNet. And uh, the one challenge was that you can only deploy premium cache. So let's say your cache requirement are not that extensive or that large that you need to use premium. But if you wanted VNet integration, you have to use premium. So that was a big challenge. With the private endpoint, if you need to access, and please keep in mind, they're different model. In the case of VNet injected, we have the cache deployed inside the VNet. It is living inside the VNet. I wish I had that picture, but it is living inside. The infrastructure is living inside the VNet. You have to set up NSGs on the VNet so your environment can breathe. What I mean, breathe mean talk to the Azure infrastructure to get updates to stay fresh. On the other hand, with the private endpoint, your cache is still running in the Azure multi-tenant environment. You just get a private endpoint to it in your workload VNet or in your virtual network. So advantages, you don't have to create a separate subnet. You don't have to set up NSGs. You don't have to do any of those things. You get a private endpoint and you can basically talk to it just like you are accessing a cache that is local. But still, the cache is in the public Azure multi-tenant infrastructure. You're just getting a private endpoint to it. Another advantage is it is available for both, for all three, for basic, standard, and premium. So let's say you are running a small application and that need cache, and you don't need to have the huge, I mean, the premium cache the premium SKU. What you can do is you can just use the standard SKU or basic SKU for that matter. Okay. Any questions on that? No questions. So let's continue to move. Okie dokie. And we'll take a look at the demo. So this is a uh, uh, this is kind of a high level overview. And folks, if you don't mind, if you can mute your phone if you're not speaking. So basically, this is yeah. Go ahead. A question. Okay, doke. So basically, this is kind of a high level tier how Azure Cache different tiers look like before we announce the premium ones. So basic, you don't have an SLA. This is basically if you're just doing development or some sort, I think it's a good idea. And since you have private endpoints, so that's there is no reason not to use this for testing purposes. And then you have standard premium. Premium allows you to do VNet injected stuff. All three tiers supports encryption in transit and all that. So this is some of the things that are supported. This is with the enterprise tier features. So as you can see, these are being developed in direct collaboration with the Redis labs. So they are bringing out whatever the enterprise Redis cache that you are used to using on-prem or in your own data center. Now they are bringing these features into a cloud into a PaaS manner. So as you can see from here, there are certain things that are happening. For example, available going up to 4 nines. Okay, you can have very high, very large size um, uh, cache. So you can go up to 1.5 terabyte, for example. And also, of course, Redis clustering is supported. I mean, that's there. But at the same time, some of the Redis features like Redis time series, Redis search, Redis Bloom. I mean, these are the enterprise features. A number of customer are used to using who are using their kind of Redis implementation or infrastructure as a service. Now you can use that as a part of a PaaS platform where you don't have to worry about feeding and caring of that infrastructure. You just worry about, I mean, you just basically deploy it and use it with your application. So kind of this is a high level overview. And now you can go up to 50,000 current connection, which can scale up to 500,000. So as you add more instances, you can be kind of cater to very, very large workload. And that's Redis on Flash. That's based on Microsoft Azure NVMe enabled virtual machine. So that's basically powering the Redis on Flash. And by the way, just keep in mind as the Redis 6.0 becomes available, these Redis Cache Enterprise SKU will be compatible with that as well. So just keep that in mind. Any questions on particular topic?
Hey, Naveed, this is a really good feature. Do you think that this will help in case of disaster recovery scenario, especially when it goes active with the geo replication?
Yeah, actually, the thing is, the Geo application is available today. The Geo
Yeah.
application with Azure Redis Cache is available today. But yes, once that is available with Redis Cache, active Geo application, so that will definitely kind of best of both worlds. So yes, that will definitely help.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
So are there any plans for container-based deployment with storage as the backend for Redis?
Uh, Not right now. I mean, you can run a Redis container yourself and do that. But at this point, I mean, you, the thing is, let's think about this scenario. Let's say you deploy it in a container. Okay, container, you have to have a virtual machine behind it. Okay, and then you have to do high availability. So you may run it multiple container instances, ACIs, or what you will have to do is you have to run it on Kubernetes. So, but now you're worrying about the underlying infrastructure. You know, if you are running an AKS cluster already for your application and you run cache there, but then you run into something else where you like you are managing and maintaining underlying infrastructure. So definitely you can do it. There's kind of I don't see any technical issue with that where you can run and Redis, you can get the Redis OS and run it in a container. But at the same time, um, you know, you have to realize that now you have more things to worry about, like, the underlying infrastructure and feeding and caring of that.
Yeah, so actually my question was more on the Microsoft end. Like, is Microsoft planning to have container-based rather than VM-based managed Redis solution? Maybe I'm thinking like if it is container-based, it will be less costlier.
Let me ask you this. Um, why do you care if it is how it is running? My point is, if you are getting a PaaS service, um, you just care about using that service. It's a Redis endpoint that you're using. Behind the scene, we run in a VM or a container. It doesn't matter. Of
Yeah.
course, I mean, your question may be like, I mean, how to bring the cost, but that's a different
Yeah,
question.
exactly. That's my intention behind the question. Like if it is container-based and it is backed by storage accounts, maybe it is less costlier than VMs. I don't know.
Maybe it's a feedback for the product team, but I mean, I'm not aware of any.
No, I don't think this will work, Naveed, because in order to run the container, there is a compute behind this
That's right.
and also management of the compute, right? So if you take all those things into consideration, suddenly it becomes very expensive. So
Yeah.
unless you are planning to deploy this container to the edge, where there's, you don't have any choice, but you have Redis Cache like feature at the edge, and then obviously that makes sense. But within Azure, I think this is a platform service, right? Nobody wants to manage compute nowadays.
Yeah. No, but I mean that's something think about if you are planning to run it on yourself, but just keep in mind anytime you try to do something on your own, you have to worry about all the underlying infrastructure. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. What is the protection or encryption for data at rest or data in motion for this
Excellent.
path?
So data is encrypted at rest, support TLS. In the data, oh sorry, in motion. Never mind. In rest, data is in the cache. So it's in the memory. But if you are persisting your cache, and let's take a look at that, then you can use the storage account that you are using, you can encrypt that storage account with your own customer managed key. So think of it. You have a cache, but you want to take a backup of the cache in the case you lose cache so you can repopulate it. Okay. In that case, you can use, you can definitely use Azure storage accounts with customer managed key based encryption.
In memory?
No, I mean, that is basically it will taking your cache and storing it on the storage account just to make a backup of it so you can restore from it if something happens to your cache.
Yep.
See what I'm saying? So yeah, you can do CMK on it. So let's take a look. So let's say if we want to create a Redis cache instance. Okay, Redis cache. Yes. So let's go. And I just want to show you what the, some of the options which are available. So basically, this is South Central US. So these are all different type of SKU. As you can see, they're enterprise, they're premium. So these are different SKU, and you can pick. So what we're gonna do, we're just gonna pick up one of the premium ones, and let's start with that. Okay, so these are the option. You can use either public endpoint, which is public. Of course, it is encrypted, but still it is available, or a public IP address. Second one, you can use a virtual network. This is, I told you, this is the VNet injected. In that case, it will be injected in a VNet inside, in a subnet inside your VNet. And you have to give it set up certain NSG for the outbound traffic so it can breathe. That's, and you can assign a private, static IP address. Otherwise, it will pick up an IP address from there. Third one is you create a private endpoint. And just keep in mind, if you do go with a private VNet injection, private endpoint is not available. So it's one of these. So if you do a private endpoint, you can go with a private endpoint. These are some of the advanced options. Okay. Availability zone. It's in public preview, but it is invitation only. So what you will have to do is you will have to email. There's a link there. You go in, you email, and then they will send you, they will whitelist your subscription, and then you will be able to do DNS zone. Non-TLS support is not enabled out of the box. If you want to use non-TLS, basically over HTTP, you can enable this. I will highly recommend don't do that, especially not for any production workload. Okay. Then you have your replica count. So that replica count will go up if you go with zones. So if you go with like 3 zones, you will have it as 3. Clustering. This allows you to, right now, you cannot enable clustering with replica. So it's either clustering or replicas. So either you use the cluster and it allows you to shard the data. The people who have used Redis Cache before, I mean, they know the advantage of clustering and all the things that they can do with the clustering. So that will allow you to do that. And these are the way you do backup. So these are the two ways, kind of you take either you take the snapshot or do the backup, and this is the frequency. And this is basically the storage account. So you create a storage account and you can later on go in and set up in that storage account customer managed key encryption. So that data is encrypted. Okay. Because I mean, cache is in the memory, in the RAM. So there's no point in encrypting that. It's important to encrypt when it is persisted into a storage account for backup. I hope that point is clear.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
How is our data in transit encryption is happening?
TLS.
Okay.
Yeah, so TLS, they're using TLS, and that's how it's happening. So just want to show a quick demo. So this is basically, I have created a private endpoint. Let me show you. I already have created a cache. So this is my cache that I have created. And if I go in here, so as you can see, this is not a virtual network. This is private endpoint. I can create more private endpoint. This is the firewall. I can add rules. So right now, I cannot access this cache. I have to specifically allow IP address. So for example, if I want to access it from my machine, I have to allow that IP address to access it. Okay. And then we have this private endpoint, and I have attached it to a VNet where it's inside a VNet. So let's do a NS lookup. I already did it, as you can see here. And it is resolving to a private endpoint. And this is kind of a small test that I'm doing. I'm just running this on my local machine. So it's accessing this particular cache, basically just like it's accessing cache over a public IP, although it's accessing over using a private IP address. So that's, once again, private endpoint for a Azure Redis Cache instance, which is in multi-tenant. I have it inside the VNet. Now I'm accessing it over that private endpoint. So this is kind of, I want to show it to you. So we have 2 more minutes. Are there any questions in the chat? Oh yeah, they should have merged. Yeah, I mean, basically there are 2 different options. If you see one where the infrastructure is in the Azure multi-tenant environment, and the second one where the infrastructure is living inside a virtual network, in your virtual network. So yes, there are 2 different options for 2 different customer scenarios. So yeah, that's why they are separate. Any other question? We have 2 more minutes. Or 1 more minute, I think. Okay. So thank you very much. Really appreciate everybody joining this session. So hope to see everybody next week for another session of Azure Power Lunch. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe.
Yes, indeed. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naveed.
Thank you very much.